As has been pointed out, it's late in the evening or early in the morning. I think
No, it isn't.
1:15. Well, for some of us, we're not used to being up at 1:15 a.m. As of 1:15 a.m., do we have any budget bills printed that discuss the details of the proposed minimum wage increase?
No, we're in the process of doing that, I think.
Now, I followed your suggestion, by the way, and thought that the best way for me to find out what was going on would be to attend the governor's press conference. Although I was...
Did you feel safe?
No, he wouldn't let me in. I should say his staff wouldn't let me in. They said
I'm going to be very careful now.
Yes, please. They said there wasn't enough room for a member of the New York State Legislature to hear the governor explain what was going on. So right after they turned me away, they let a whole bunch of other people in, of course. So
they were thinner than you.
Perhaps. But it seems strange to me that there's, as I understand it, there's no exception on the minimum wage increase that I heard in any of the press reports for small businesses, correct? So they're going to be hit with an increase in the minimum wage?
Yes, they will be. But at the same time, we are, as I said before, they are getting help through that income tax cut.
Well, the individual employees get a help with an income tax cut.
No, but when you use the word small businesses, you usually find that the small businesses really are small. They may have one or two workers, and they also get everything comes in, they pay for everything, and it all goes through their income tax, so they will be getting back an income tax cut simultaneously with it at the same time.
That's assuming, of course, that they are still able to make any income after we raise all their expenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps. Can I look at the farm workforce retention credit? I appreciate the comments from my colleague on Long Island. Farming is very important to us in Chautauqua County. I understand the first year, the tax credit for a full-time employee would be the equivalent of about 12.5 cents.
Yes.
But the minimum wage goes up by 70 cents. The second year, the tax credit is worth about 15 cents, but the minimum wage by then has gone up by $1.40. So while this helps, it's pretty insignificant in comparison, isn't it, to the increase in costs experienced by the agricultural community?
What's the question? Was that a question?
Yes, my
sorry.
question is...
I must be falling asleep standing up. Ask me again.
I can certainly relate, and sometimes that happens to me too. It just seems that the amount of the tax credit is very small compared to the amount of the increase.
Well, I think the 70% that we put in the upstate, and we were doing that because we know that they have problems. As I've said earlier, there's also other things we're doing that they will give them a chance to get credits. So it's not just one thing. There are many things we've been doing, hoping to help the farmer, because we understand we need to have our farmers, and we're not going to do anything to hurt them if we can. But we also have to make sure we're doing what's right in terms of helping the workers.
Well, let's talk just a moment about timing, if I can. We expect the farmers to pay the increase in minimum wage every week or biweekly when they make payroll, right?
Yeah.
But they can't apply for this credit. They cannot apply for the credit until a year later?
Yeah, when you file your taxes, yes, same time.
So they bear 100% of the cost increase and then get a small fraction in the form of a tax credit a year, year and a quarter later.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that happens.
I note that the farm tax credit gives a tax credit in the first year of a maximum of $250 per employee as long as the employee works at least 500 hours. Why? So in other words, if I'm a farmer and I have 4 part-time employees, if I read this correctly, I get 4 times more of a tax credit than if I have 1 full-time employee. Is that correct?
Yes, if they're making more than $500.
So what is the public policy rationale?
I'm sorry, 500 hours.
Hours, right. So what is the public policy rationale for penalizing farmers who have full-time employees and encouraging them to only use part-time employees?
Well, I really don't like the word penalize, because I think we're working to help everyone. And again, they're also, remember, we're talking about human beings, the owner and the workers. So we're trying to do something that helps both of them. We think this program, and you can see that we look to that, because if you look in New York City, in 3 years, they will be up to the full amount, whereas we have set it up in upstate, so it will be at $12.50 after 5 years. So we've understood that there is a problem, but we also want to make sure that we help the worker as well.
Perhaps I misphrased the question. Perhaps I should have said, why do we want to give a tax credit that's 4 times larger for a farmer that uses only part-time employees compared to a farmer that would use full-time employees?
Now, I don't understand. Are you for the bill or against the bill? You've come up with a good idea to help the farmer. Now you're saying that's wrong?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out why it is that we want to give so much more of a tax credit for farmers that only use part-time employees.
Well,
when it seems to me that if we're trying to help farm workers, we would want to use our tax code to encourage more full-time employment rather than use the tax code to encourage only part-time employment.
Yeah, but one other thing I didn't say is that farm workers most farm workers make more than the minimum wage. So we may be arguing about something that's not real, because if they're getting above the minimum payroll, that they would not be affected. And we can't assume that everybody that works for them is only making $8 or $9. They're making more.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. I appreciate your comments and your clarifications on the bill.
On the bill, Mr. Goodell.
I think there's this perception that if you raise the minimum wage for our farmers, they can simply pass the costs on to the consumer. That's just not true. For many of our farmers, your dairy farmers, the price they receive for the milk is not set at the farm. It's a regional price. So that takes into account what the price is in Pennsylvania and Ohio and across the whole region. So when we say to a farmer, we're going to raise your cost of labor by raising the minimum wage to more than double the national average, they're in direct competition with all those other farms in other states, and they cannot raise the price of milk. It's a set price. Many of our farms, especially the family farms, are operating on very thin margins. While I appreciate the fact that we're giving our farming community a tax credit, a 12.5-cent tax credit on a 70-cent increase in your cost doesn't cut it. It doesn't work. And in year 2, the separation becomes greater. In year 2 upstate, they'll be paying a minimum wage that's $1.40 higher, and they're getting 15 cents an hour tax credit. That just doesn't work. And it's not just for the agricultural community that's in the dairy production. The same is true, for example, on grapes. The price for grapes is not set at the farm. It's a national market. And so our farmers are facing a huge increase that we're imposing on them All of our family farms are facing this, and we give them a little dribble of a tax credit that they can claim next year on their tax return. My friends, it doesn't work. The numbers don't work. So I don't understand why we, as a legislature, are so intent on making it so difficult for our family farms to survive in New York State. I just don't understand it. And so I'm looking forward to the day when we recognize that our family farms that are working on thin margins cannot afford an increase in minimum wage that puts them double the national average, and a small token tax cut doesn't cut it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Garbarino.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield for a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Just a quick question. What is the? I see in the bill here under Part DD that Finger Lakes Racetrack gets an additional VLT vendor fee. What's that? What's the intent behind that?
And what did we do? What did we do? Yeah. We did that. We increased the amount because there's a competition and they were losing to the other unit in their area. And normally they have a balance, but it happened one was in one area and the other was in the other area, so they didn't have the same thing that everything else had. So we had to pass this law to say that it got to be equalized.
So are you talking about the new Lago Casino that's going to be
Yes.
opening up?
There's another one next to it, and it's causing the problem.
So that what this will do, it'll make sure that the racetrack does not, the racetrack owners don't lose any money coming in
Yes.
from loss of VLT.
Yes.
Is there anything in the budget that guarantees the purses for the horsemen at the racetrack?
Say that again, sir.
Is there anything in the budget that guarantees the purse levels for the horsemen at Finger Lakes?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're
On the bill. On the bill.
On the bill, Mr. Garbarino.
When we originally did the casino legislation a couple years ago, we set up rules so that if there was any competing casinos put in areas where there were racinos, the racinos and the horsemen would be guaranteed a certain amount of gaming revenue, so the purses wouldn't go below 2013 levels. For some odd reason, Finger Lakes is not in the same area as the Lago Casino, even though it's only 33 miles apart. As of right now, Finger Lakes Racetrack has 71% of New York thoroughbred horsemen running at that track. That is a huge amount. Now, the concern here is the estimate is that if the VLT revenue goes down, which is about 40%, the purses are going to go down. This might cause the horsemen to actually leave and go somewhere else, because if they can't make the money there, they're going to go somewhere else. The budget bill does nothing to correct this. There is a bill that the chairman of the Racing Wagering Committee does have, and I think we should take it up this year, but I feel like we really did miss something today by not including this fix in the budget. We make a fix for the for the racetrack owners, which is great because it protects them and makes sure they stay open, but there's nothing here to protect the horsemen. I have a quote here from the Finger Lakes Horsemen Association president, David Brown. He says, I just had a board meeting, and I told them, and I mean it, that unless we get the same deal as any other track, we're going to close. I don't think there's any question about it. He further said that by 2018, racing at this track will end. Now, we have this fix here today to make sure that the track doesn't close, to help to make sure that the VLT revenue stays. But if racing ends, the track has to close because you can't have VLTs without a racetrack. So this is something that has to be addressed. And since we didn't do it today, I suggest that we do it very soon, or we're going to lose one of the more successful tracks in the state. I don't think the intent of the original casino bill was to put other racetracks or to put racetracks out of business, but I think that's what's going to happen. So I think this needs to be addressed. And thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Palumbo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the sponsor yield for just a few brief
Will
questions?
you yield, Mr. Farrell?
Yes, I will, Mr. Speaker.
Sponsor yields.
Yes, Mr. Colombo.
Thank you, Denny. On the real property taxes, on the STAR exemption and this personal income tax credit, my question really is more of a practical aspect. This is done, the way I understand it, by way of an application, a written application now, instead of actually us reimbursing and spending it. It's now more of a loss of revenue. Is that how that's going to be, that it's the income tax credit will be done by way of a form that will be filled out?
Yes, if you want to get it by September.
And in that regard, the current STAR exemption is automatically renewed, especially, I know there were some issues recently with enhanced STAR or with the basic STAR, but my question is, will this, once an applicant who is now on the income tax credit side, once the deed transfer happens or however this mechanism will ultimately work, will it be automatically renewed every year, or will the taxpayer have to apply for the check to get it by September by way of that form each year?
It would be automatic. If it's new, they would be automatic.
So once they've done it, it'll be automatic?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Just another area, if I may, the farm workforce retention tax credit. Did you indicate that was if an employee has 500 hours or more, that makes them eligible during a taxable year?
Yes.
That they would then the employer is eligible to take this exemption?
Yes.
Okay. And that is, of course, done on a refund basis. That it would be done at the completion of the tax year. Now, when you do the math, and again, some of my colleagues did mention this. Well, you know what? I'll say that that's not by way of a question. If I could speak on the bill, please. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
On the bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, as was so aptly mentioned by my colleague representing the South Fork of Long Island, I represent the North Fork of Long Island. I believe I have 52 wineries in my district, and sod farms and many others. And when you think about now, we are in the $15 range, not the $12.50 range like upstate. In 2021, we will have increased the minimum wage by $6, from $9 to $15. The $600 per farm employee tax credit is about 2 weeks worth of subsidy, if you want to call it that. At $6 an hour times 40 hours a week, it's about $240. When you add on payroll costs, unemployment insurance, workman's comp, all of those other aspects of having an employee, you're up to at least $300 a week. So for 52 weeks, they're going to pay this employee, hopefully, $15 an hour, and they're being the tax credit they're being reimbursed for is for 2 weeks of the increase. So as was mentioned previously, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but this is so clearly, this is just, the intention obviously is what it is, that it was intended to subsidize to an extent, but this is nowhere near a reasonable subsidy of any kind, especially in a district like mine where that's virtually the backbone of our economy. And when you think about this 500 hours, I have a lot of seasonal employees, as many of you know, that someone like myself who now, as April comes along, we joke to enjoy your left turns, because now the summer folks are coming and you won't be able to make a left-hand turn. And in not my district, we go through the pumpkin picking season and Christmas trees, and we ultimately get to make a left turn again without taking 25 minutes in December. So we've got seasonal employees, and that influx of folks creates a need and an influx of seasonal employees. So many of these different businesses and farms and wineries, and really they pray for sunny weekends so that they can really make their money at that time. And the influx of people obviously creates an increase in business, and they may not reach that 500-hour threshold in many circumstances, where they will need several new employees just for that stretch of the summer. But if they're weekends only, or holiday weekends, or just even on a part-time basis, I don't think this was very well thought out, and I'm really quite concerned about it. And this, just generally speaking, on this minimum wage increase, we're creating all these carve-outs and nuances, how it's going to affect Long Island more slowly, and we're going to only bring it up to $12.50 upstate. I think in and of itself, that shows that this idea sounds great on paper, but I think we're all well aware of the potential adverse impacts that are unintended. Seattle and San Francisco now, I see the jury seems to still be out, that there are some studies or some empirical data that are saying Seattle has lost 10,000 jobs in 3 months. And then others are saying they're doing just fine. But that's a little bit different economy versus Long Island and versus upstate. A metropolis like San Francisco that already is somewhat of an affluent, or not somewhat, they're affluent areas, as is New York City. And they could probably bear the brunt of this much better than an area like mine that's small business central. We have mom and pop businesses. I don't believe we have any more than 10 businesses with 25 or more employees. So this is of great concern to me. And then coupling that with the star exemption changes that, and again, as ably mentioned by some of my colleagues who have already spoken, that is a good program. That is a wonderful thing, because where I live, many people, if not most, I would say, or most overwhelmingly own their property. So property taxes are a huge issue, unlike other regions, and certainly in the city, where there are certainly more tenants. You would think that those folks may not be as concerned about property taxes as we are. So based upon our economies, based upon our taxes, based upon the nature of our constituency, which has a lot of seniors who aren't quite able in many circumstances to negotiate the quagmire of paperwork that might ultimately end up being a result of this personal income tax credit. I think that it ain't broke, so we don't need to fix it. So one last comment on that. It seems to me, and I think to answer the question that some of us have asked somewhat rhetorically, that we're just simply taking this money, it's about $3.4 billion, I understand, that we spend on the star exemption. We're taking it now from the spending side and simply moving it to the revenue column, which ultimately now allows us to spend more, that we have less revenue coming in, so we don't necessarily have to write that check on the spending side. So I know it sounds a little bit cynical, but I think this is really a backhanded way to try and get around the fact that we may want to spend or have more money to spend, or maybe not stay within the 2% cap in future years. So I am quite concerned about it. There are a lot of good ideas in this bill. The tax cuts are great, and the retention tax credit for farmers is wonderful in principle, but we really, really need to revisit that and think about indexing that with each region as the minimum wage goes up. So I thank you again, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield, please?
Mr. Farrell, will you yield?
Yes, I will, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Farrell yields.
Thank you. Good morning, Denny. 1:45. You're
Good
doing great.
afternoon.
You're doing great. It's not afternoon yet, but we're going to get there.
I'm still
All right.
summer.
Now, this is feeling reasonable to me. I'm bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. How are you doing? You doing all right?
If I stop talking, I'll fall down.
All right. Well, I don't want to hurt you. All right. I want to focus a little bit on the farm workforce tax credit that we've been talking about a little bit. And a couple of my colleagues made reference to this, and I too want to echo. My district, I represent a fair number of farms, a lot of dairy farms. Mm-hmm. They don't control the price of milk. The price of milk is set in Chicago, so they've got nowhere to control their price point. And we are now going to hit their expense side with a minimum wage hike. Now, like I said, it's about 1:45 in the morning. We are on our 4th budget bill of the day, so on April 1st. So we got approximately 5 more budget bills to go that haven't been printed yet. I haven't seen, but I thought I heard you talking to one of my other colleagues earlier about, for upstate, what is the projected minimum wage schedule that we can expect to see in a future budget bill that we haven't seen yet? Please?
What did I? No, the only thing I did was I spoke about upstate or in farms. Then the rest of the state, it would be $12.50 over 5 years.
So next year, next year it was going to go from $9 to $9.70.
Yeah, right, from $9 to $9.70.
And
it would be a 70 cents increase
next year
over the next 5 years.
All right, each year for the next
Which
5
would get
years.
them up to $12.50.
To 12. All right, so we are going to land on $12.50 because, most of my constituents are asleep right now, and it hasn't been in print anywhere where we were going to land on minimum wage. Mm-hmm. I doubt we're going to get there tonight because we got several budget bills to get there through before we get to the minimum wage one. But all right, so we're in this bill though. We are looking at in the first year a $250 per farm employee tax credit. That sounds good. But that works out to 12 cents an hour credit on a 70-cent projected increase. So that's, to me, my math, that's 58 cents that's not accounted for. We're going to raise minimum wage 70 cents an hour. This tax credit is going to offset 12 cents of that. So my question is, between this bill and the minimum wage bill that we'll do later and the other bills that might be in between, what else are we doing for our farmers to offset this expense that's going to hit them like a ton of bricks that they have no control over on their price points? Is there anything else coming in future budget bills besides this tax credit?
No, well, first thing, not everybody who works is working for $8.
Understand.
And there's, a matter of fact, many of them are making more than the $12.50 would hit. So you can't take your numbers. You're making the assumption that everybody on the farm only makes $8.
$9.
$9. Well, that just happened this week, so.
Right.
And so they just went up to 9. And you're saying that, and you're doing your numbers there. It's not going to be that way. So that number is not really what it is. We are going to do things to help that farmer, depending on how large or small his farm may be, may get back, as I said, on the income tax cut. He gets money back there. There are other things. We have other programs that we put in where he can get certain people to work, where he will get a credit for those people, young people.
Right.
So he can do things there. So I don't know if it's a plus or a minus, but it's not a major negative. And again, we're still forgetting that this is being done to help workers, human beings. So everybody here is getting a taste.
Unless the farms shutter their
If
doors.
you happen to be one of the persons that everybody was getting $9,
right,
then your numbers might be right.
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Danny, but this, of course, assumes that we're not going to see any of our farms close.
No, I'm just saying it's not going to be all, they're not all going to be over it, and they're not all going to be under it. They will make, so it won't be that bad. And again, I've said it before, if we take all of these arguments that I'm hearing now and we did it, you and I would be making $50 a week, and that would be it. You know,
Some
and
would
you
say
got to
we're still
remember,
overpaid.
there was always a fight when we raised pay, even our own. Everybody always says, you can't afford it, you can't afford it. If that were true, we'd all still be wearing tiger cloth on your shoulder and swinging through the trees. But we're not doing that. We've moved forward. Henry Ford in 1905 or 10 did something like this when he decided to pay all of his workers $10 a day. All his friends called him, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" He says, "What good is having a car that my workers can't buy?" So he put it in. The world didn't end, and Ford is still in business. So I think this is something we do that helps everybody. Everybody gets something doing that's good for them. So I think in the end, when we look at this budget, when we wake up 3 weeks from now, we'll see it was a really good job when we look at the tax cuts and the things we've done with it.
All right. Thank you, Denny. You're